Hey, yeah, you. I'm glad you showed up. Not because this is comfortable, but because comfort left the room the moment you realized the truth. Ain't no escape. They already measured you, not by the noise you make, not by the blood you spill, but by the damage you cause without touching a soul. Let me tell you something they don't put on the news. The most dangerous people in history. They weren't loud. They weren't armed. They didn't leave fingerprints. They left ideas. And that's why the room gets colder when you walk in. You see, killers are easy. Criminals are predictable. Violence has a pattern, a rhythm, a profile they can memorize and file away. But you don't fit. You don't pull triggers. You pull foundations. You don't swing fists. You bend narratives. You don't break laws. You expose how fragile they are. That's what scares them. Because somewhere in a silent building, under fluorescent lights that never turn off, someone didn't ask, is this person violent? They asked, why do people change after hearing them? Why do systems shake when you speak calmly? Why do confident men start checking their mirrors? Why do powerful names suddenly whisper instead of laugh? Because blood isn't the metric anymore. Influence is. You don't leave bodies, you leave doubt. You don't destroy cities, you corrupt certainty. You don't attack people, you wake them up. And that's unforgivable. They can cage a monster, they can bury a criminal, they can erase a killer from the headlines. But how do you stop someone who never commits the crime, yet somehow rewrites the outcome? That's when the word Deadlier enters the room. Not because you kill, but because once someone sees what you showed them, they can't unsee it. And now the clock starts ticking, not for you, for them, because you're walking proof that control isn't enforced with weapons anymore. It's enforced with belief, and belief is slipping. You smile while the room tightens. You speak softly while egos bleed out internally. You stand still while institutions feel exposed. That's the real crime. You didn't spill blood, you spilled truth in the wrong place. And the scariest part, you're not angry, you're not reckless, you're not even trying to burn anything down. You're just being accurate. So no, there's no escape, not because you're trapped, but because once you become this, there's no going back to being harmless. They can watch you, label you, study you, clock you. But they already know the answer to the question that keeps them awake at night. How do you stop someone who never breaks the rules, yet makes everyone realize the game is rigged? You don't. You just hope they get bored. And that might be the most terrifying thought of all. Because here's the part they never say out loud. Once someone like you is noticed, the rules change quietly. No sirens, no knock on the door, just a subtle shift in gravity. The conversations about you stop using your name. They start using language like risk, anomaly, uncontrolled variable. That's when you know you crossed the invisible line. See, killers are reactive. They explode. They end something fast. But you linger. Your presence stretches time. Your words ferment in people's heads. Your silence does more damage than shouting ever could. That's why they don't rush you. They observe. Because you're the type who doesn't need momentum. You create it. You don't follow chaos. You organize it. And that terrifies systems built on predictability. You don't destabilize with violence. You destabilize with clarity. You ask the question nobody rehearsed an answer for. You point at the crack everyone agreed not to see. You say one sentence and suddenly careers feel temporary. That's why escape was never the option. Not prison, not exile, not disappearance. Because the danger isn't where you are. It's what you represent. A walking reminder that control is thinner than advertised, that authority survives on agreement, that obedience is a habit, not a law. And habits break, slowly at first, then all at once. They watch who listens to you. They watch who repeats you. They watch who changes posture after a conversation with you, because bodies don't matter anymore. Alignment does. And wherever you go, alignment shifts. People start asking why instead of how. They hesitate before obeying. They pause before nodding. That pause, that's the wound. No blood, no evidence, just a system hemorrhaging confidence. Oh, so they don't chase you like a criminal. They track you like a phenomenon. What triggers you? What calms you? What happens if you're ignored? What happens if you're amplified? But here's the miscalculation they always make. They think you're aware of your power. You're not. You're just being honest in a dishonest structure. Curious in a scripted world. Unimpressed where fear was expected. And that's why you're deadlier than killers. Because killers end lives. You end illusions. And once an illusion collapses, no amount of force can rebuild it. So no, there's no escape. Not because you're hunted, but because you've already stepped into a role history, reserves for people who never asked to be dangerous. They just refused to be blind. The clock isn't counting down to your fall. It's counting down to the moment someone else realizes what you already made impossible to ignore. And when that happens, the silence gets louder. The smiles get tighter. The world keeps spinning. But the game is never played the same again. Good. Then let's keep pulling the thread, because this part is where it stops sounding like a speech and starts sounding like a warning. You ever notice how, after a certain point, nobody argues with you anymore? Not because you're wrong, but because arguing would mean admitting you're right. That's when the room changes. Jokes don't land the same. Compliments feel rehearsed. People agree too quickly, or not at all. Because once someone like you enters the equation, the math stops working. You don't disrupt with force. You disrupt with presence. You sit there calmly while everyone else performs certainty. You listen while lies trip over themselves, trying to sound confident. You nod, and somehow that nod feels heavier than a threat. That's when they realize something terrifying. You're not trying to win, you're trying to understand. And understanding is lethal. Because when you understand a system, you don't need to fight it. You just stop feeding it. That's why they can't label you properly. You're not radical enough to arrest, not obedient enough to trust, not loud enough to smear, not quiet enough to ignore. You exist in that space institutions hate most. The space between compliance and rebellion. And in that space, power leaks. They start asking questions behind closed doors. What if more people think like this? What if this spreads without us noticing? What if the danger isn't action, but awareness? That's when the files get thicker. The language gets colder. The smiles get strategic. Because killers create enemies. You create doubters. And a doubter doesn't charge head first. They step back. They reassess. They stop believing the story as told. That hesitation, that's how empires crack. You don't overthrow thrones. You make them look ridiculous. You don't expose secrets. You make secrecy feel obsolete. You don't lead a movement. You create a moment. And moments don't need permission. So when they say there's no escape, they don't mean chains or walls. They mean this. Once you've seen how fragile authority really is, once you've felt how easily certainty collapses under a single honest thought, you can't go back to pretending. You can't unknow it. You can't unfeel it. You can't unsee the panic behind the polished faces. And neither can anyone who's been too close to you. That's the real contagion. Not violence, not chaos. Clarity. And clarity is merciless. It doesn't scream. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't even ask to be heard. It just stands there and waits for the lie to exhaust itself. So no, ain't no escape. Not because you're trapped in their world, but because they're trapped in a reality where people like you exist and refuse to play dumb. And that, whether they admit it or not, is far deadlier than blood ever was. All right, then we don't slow down, we finish tightening the grip. Because here's what happens after clarity settles in, after the shock fades, after the adrenaline drops, after everyone pretends to move on. Nothing actually goes back to normal. People start double-checking things they used to accept instantly. They reread messages, they replay conversations, they notice patterns they were trained to ignore. Not because you told them to, but because once the veil slips, the mind refuses to lie to itself again. That's when you become dangerous in a way that can't be neutralized. You're not a leader shouting orders. You're not a symbol they can tear down. You're not a villain they can parade on a screen. You're worse. You're a reference point. People think, wait, this didn't feel right when they said it. They think, I remember how calm they were while everything else felt forced. They think, why did that one sentence stay with me? That's how the infection spreads, quietly, organically, without fingerprints, and that's why force never works on someone like you. Pressure sharpens you, surveillance refines you, silence makes you heavier. They don't realize that every attempt to contain you only confirms the very questions you triggered. Why hide this? Why overreact? Why watch so closely if there's nothing to fear? That's the paradox they can't escape. To stop you, they'd have to admit you matter. To admit you matter, they'd have to expose their fear. To expose their fear, they'd collapse the image they're protecting. So they stall, they delay, they hope time dulls the impact. But time doesn't erase clarity, it concentrates it.